I'm in New York State, my physical location, and I am a psychologist and sex therapist. I'm what's called the diplomate of sex therapy, and I'm doing that for quite some time. My own work really has evolved over the years. I'm a certified school psychologist, so I've worked with young children, and I'm also a geriatric psychologist where I've consulted in skilled nursing homes and subacute facilities. So I've really, as far as developmentally, I've worked with people, from preschool right to over 100 years old.
Wow.
And it's been wonderful, and I think in some ways too, where these days my work really specializes with adults and couples. Uh, I sort of look at my own personal and professional development as corresponding, I think, to my own aging process. I've moved up the ladder, in many ways. And my work in human sexuality, which has been my first love and what I've done primarily in my career, I've been around long enough to really see the evolution of the field of sex therapy
Mhm.
and sexuality. My original training was in New York City, doing a postdoc back in the late 1970s, and that was the age of Plato's Retreat and Studio 54 and things like, the younger folks can kind of Google those terms. But it was the beginning of really the sexual revolution and awakening of what had been a much more conservative and somewhat repressive traditional view of relationships and sexuality. But that, hailing from Masters and Johnson and subsequently in those following years, the field exploded, and it was mostly in regard to sexual dysfunction. So it's like, wow, how great we could do something to help people to be able to function well sexually. And that then kind of rolled into the 80s, which is really where AIDS really hit. So that kind of pushed things back, and also some more conservative thinking came into play in those days. So that was another change up until probably at the end of the 90s, with the development of the PDE5s, Viagra being the first one that came out. It was March 27th, 1997, I believe. With where Viagra came out. So now that led to sort of a new renaissance of helping people to be able to function successfully. And then of course, this thing called the internet was really developed, and that's more of a 21st century phenomena. And now then with broadband and social media and everything, and ultimately the smartphone. And we're just kind of now moving toward, virtual reality is a thing. We're moving towards AI and how that will influence sexuality. So I've kind of been privileged to see the evolution of our work in the field of sexuality. With me and my own particular practice, what I've come to specialize in addition to helping people with sexual dysfunction, I treat a lot of men who are dealing with ED, for instance, as a primary problem. Couples suffering from discrepant desire in their relationship. But I've developed sort of a subspecialty with treating infidelity, or really the more apt term today is cyber infidelity. Because cyber infidelity, which we normally will think of as infidelity that occurs purely on the internet. So for instance, camming could be looked at, well, gee, in a couple that does not have that understanding, it could be treated by the other partner as, oh, gee, that's infidelity, and become quite upset about that. Or any form of erotica, porn, etc. could be considered cyber infidelity. My my take is that all infidelity today is cyber infidelity, because even if it doesn't occur and is limited to online, it could be in person, it could be maintained by text, sexting, smartphone. There's some form of technology that either initiates or maintains the cheating behavior. So I deal with lots of individuals and couples, and sometimes uh, that are dealing with some aspect of cyber infidelity that's threatening their relationship, and also some folks that deal with out of control sexual behaviors, where some people will call that sexual addiction. I don't really ascribe to that kind of conceptualization. But when sexual behavior feels out of control, and it's inconsistent with a sense of wellness for the person in their own sexuality, I will also address many individuals who are dealing with that. And then it can be then related to issues of cyber infidelity, because now they're taking their sexual behavior, online in ways that is unacceptable to the partner. Okay, usually with elements of secretiveness, and it's not accepted within the relationship. So long story short, that's a lot of what my work and my practice is. And these days also, I'm working exclusively online, whether I'm giving webinars or teaching my model of treating infidelity. When I work with couples, when I work with individuals, just with the start of the pandemic, actually, for the first time, I closed my physical office, and I've been ever since working exclusively online.
I feel like the pandemic, as tough and as hard as it was and is, I think it seems pretty much done, but I feel like there were gifts that came out of it. And I do think that one of the big gifts was how efficient we were all able to get by realizing that so many things can still continue and be done, even if they're no longer in person.
Yes.
That we can effectively use the internet, Zoom. This project was born in the pandemic stage, where it was understood that we can just do Zoom interviews for the calls, as opposed to trying to have people in the office or whatever the
Yeah.
case is.
Yes. What I might add about that is that in terms of sex therapy or psychotherapy, it has made it so much more accessible to people that normally, I've got to drive half hour to your office and half hour back, or if you're working with a couple and their schedules are different, then now one person could be at work, another person could be at home. There's no commute. It's made it much more available to people than traditional therapy approaches.
Absolutely. You've had quite the career, and ranging from, it sounds like, many different ends of the spectrum, which is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a few questions based off of what you just shared. The first, I would say, is you talked about cyber infidelity, and it's a really interesting point you made about the fact that it either starts online or it is maintained digitally somehow,
Yes.
through
Yes.
messaging or video calls or whatever the case is. And I think we can all agree that that is true. People meet someone on social media or a dating app, or even, some people might consider the cam dynamic, cyber infidelity, if they're in a partnership
Yes.
and not disclosing that, and that's not
Yes.
an agreement. How do you, I know you said you kind of work to fix cyber infidelity.
Yes.
How does that get fixed?
Yeah.
It's my guess is that it could be a values issue between the partners.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious on how you fix something like that. That is extremely prevalent in this day and age.
Yeah. Yeah. And You are correct. Values are central and involved uh, with the issue, and the whole idea of online sexuality, whether it's camming or something else, and how it plays in a relationship is very much about the relationship itself. And so many relationships get together uh, with an implied understanding of what the values are, what the boundaries are, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, but not really enunciated or spelled out, where they're not made explicit, but it's kind of assumed that, yeah, we're looking at it the same way, or we think about it in the same way, and now we go forward in creating this commitment to each other, whether it's a marriage or a partnership of any kind. Um, so that's kind of how we embark upon it. And then, time goes along, and, one person will get involved with something, whether through social media, whether with online porn, whether with camming, whatever the case may be. And well, we never really talked about that. We never really considered it. Is it okay? Is it not okay? How does it play in the relationship? And so often, when folks get to my screen, okay, it's an example of, in a relationship, it was not explicit, it was not addressed, it was not understood, and now it's like this bomb that goes off within the relationship, and that you've got to deal with that, and to see, can the relationship survive? Can it get beyond that upset? And can it actually serve in a way that, on the other side of the distress, the relationship can not only survive, but maybe even thrive in a better way? And it does actually, I'm glad to say, have that potential, and I've seen it.
It's interesting because you mentioned a group of people that may have certain fantasies or desires that are beyond what their partner is comfortable with, or maybe they're afraid to even share it with their partner because they don't want to be judged. That is a significant user base that is on LiveJasmin, are people that
Yes,
want to explore fantasy.
yes,
They haven't ever found anyone who's comfortable with that, or
yeah,
they're afraid of even sharing it, and they just want to see if they even like it first.
yes,
And so they're able to engage in a very non-threatening way because no one's touching or meeting or anything.
yeah,
It's very much fantasy what
yes,
happened,
yes, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and it really provides, it provides an option that does not require, again, with my interest in terms of infidelity and cheating, doesn't require going out in a face-to-face situation and developing a sexual encounter or a relationship out in the world. It allows for that safety, if you will, and that limitation of, well, gee, I'm dealing with someone on a screen, I'm dealing with someone in a limited way, that gives me that freedom, but also that safety, with STIs, with so many other aspects that provide an opportunity for that kind of exploration, and even sexual self-discovery. Many potential benefits.
How crucial is our connection to our sexuality?
It's vitally important for my sense of self, for my the benefits of sexuality in terms of physical health, which are many, from improvement in sleep, improvement in the immune system. So many aspects that are beneficial sexually, psychologically, and physically with health. That, yeah, if I can realize that, if I can actualize that, that will probably be a very important part of my life and my sense of well-being. Okay. However, as you also suggest, that there's a challenge to doing that, because it doesn't necessarily fit the mold of what the larger society finds acceptable, or doesn't even demonize or villainize in many ways. It may not fit the mold of the particular relationship that I have engaged with. And as we were saying before, have not really clarified and developed a sense of what's okay, what's not okay, what's comfortable. We just kind of assume. So now that conflict, that erotic conflict can develop of an inconsistency of who I am and my preferred way of living with my actual ecology, my actual environment, whether it's with my relationship or the larger issues of society beyond. And this creates so much tension, anxiety, depression. Um, I want to be myself. I want to be my sexual self, but it's not okay. And if I decide to go that way, I also will hazard that. Gee, will I lose an important relationship? Will I lose a job? Will I be um, um, uh, considered an outcast in my own community, in my own society?
I find it really fascinating that, you've worked with almost every single age group. I think that's like a real interesting opportunity and privilege in life to
Yes.
see and hear life through so many different stages of it.
Mhm.
I'm curious, having worked with everything from children to full adult, um, what are some of just those basic human similarities that you've found in everyone?
Well, there are differences. There, there are differences developmentally, where I think that the younger ages, as we move into adolescence, it's really one of acceptance of 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 really working my way through. Uh, am am I acceptable? Okay, who am I? All right, and what's so interesting is that people will, depending how well that's gone for them in their adolescence into and through early adulthood, sometimes working as a sex therapist and as a psychologist, you deal with a person who could be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they are confronting those issues that hit in pre-adolescence and adolescence that didn't really get worked out in a comfortable way where the who am I part. And once I figure that out, is that acceptable? Is still an ongoing struggle. So that would probably be the common denominator or the common thread that I find, is that as a lifelong quest, it's a question of at what stage developmentally can we get to that point where we know who we are and we feel who we are is acceptable and is okay. All right, and that I think there's no age limit on that. It kind of develops. It depends upon the particular journey of the individual in their development. If that addresses what you're asking.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really profound. Um, that we all innately are constantly questioning, asking that question. Was it Socrates who kept asking, who am I? Who am I to someone? It was one of the great philosophers.
Yeah.
They kept
Yeah.
asking, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And the person would say their name, what they do, their family. And
Yeah.
he was trying to give them the idea that that's not who you are. It's deeper, like keep going.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's fascinating that we all have, and we all know it's true, this constant questioning of who am I? Like, why am I here? And
Yeah. Yeah.
what am I doing? And
Yeah.
like you said, and is it acceptable? Because we all are deeply needing to be accepted by the group. And I think
Yeah.
that's why this new era. I mean, it's not new, but it's a really strong tactic these days of like cancel culture and casting people out. It's really hard on people because they need to be accepted and to feel like they're acceptable. We're very social as humans. And I think too, that's part of why online spaces like LiveJasmin or different social media platforms
Yeah,
are extremely robust because
yeah.
people are looking for that form of acceptance in whatever way speaks the most to them.
Yeah, I think it has these types of outlets have provided an opportunity again that previously, let's say the last century, which was not long ago, didn't exist. It was either finding a group, finding like-minded people in some face-to-face forum or opportunity. Now you can find your way right sitting in your own living room, and having that opportunity to connect and feel a part of, and that's been one of the wonderful aspects of what's developed.
Is the reason that we are so obsessed with sexuality, and is it about the sexuality and explicit and sex itself? Or is there a deeper reason that we are so drawn to sex? Is it part of feeling, because usually when there is a dynamic of intimacy, you are feeling some form of accepted or
Yes, yes, yeah,
connected. Is
yes.
the actual deeper obsession, or is it just sexuality?
No, I think it's quite complex and multi-determined. I think sexuality is in part about connection. It is about that drive to feel accepted in such an intimate and profound way. It helps with when I'm connecting to this other being. I'm not alone. I'm with someone. I'm part of something larger. I think so. There are those aspects. There's even a deep aspect. I think you were talking about Socrates before, but going. This is another old Greek who can talk a little bit about what's referred to as eros and thanatos. Thanatos being representing death, eros, okay, being the life force, and eros, erotic, right? Uh, it's that sense of sexuality that makes us alive. Uh, Eros is something that is our effort against death, and to feel vital in that regard. And sexuality can also uh, 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 fulfill that feeling and that desire. And then there's also carnal pleasure. There's the sense of hedonism and eroticism, and just the sense of the joy of experiencing those feelings. So sex is so multi-determined and so complex that sometimes we take sort of a simplistic view of it, an immature view. That's one of the things we struggle with in our society. It's either prurient or forbidden. We go in a very immature view of sexuality, but some of that I think is also inflamed by the threat that it seems to pose, to our culture, our society, our relationships. So the dark side of sex is very threatening. And what can this do? What could it mean? The power of sex.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Very well said. Thank you for that. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on camming? I'm assuming you've had clients who probably use cam
Yeah,
sex and yeah.
yeah. I think like so many things, there's good and bad, and it all depends on how you use it, right? I think the potential for it is vast, because I think it provides a safety. Okay, when it's, particularly when it's a vetted, established type of site. Because believe it or not, I've had patients who've come in where the explosion in their relationship has occurred because they behaved online, with these false and anonymous kinds of sources, where they're actually being blackmailed, where they even think they might be, a guy might be interacting with a woman. Well, it's not a woman at all. I think the opportunity to interact with an established, solid, legitimate kind of organization is provides great safety in that regard. And again, if it's done in a way where it allows the person to express themselves, and to whether it's helping an individual who's alone with loneliness, whether it's helping a person explore his or her sexual desires, and figure out their sexual selves. So many constructive and very good uses of that kind of an outlet. Again, the other side, it poses a potential challenge in a relationship if it's done in secrecy, without that understanding of, well, what are the parameters, what are the boundaries of the relationship, what's okay. So now, not just LiveJasmin, but any online forum or any online activity could pose a threat to that sort of a relationship. So the key is having that intimate conversation and having a sense of, what's okay, what's not okay, what's comfortable. We're all entitled to, want to explore our own sexuality, but we have to accept that ethically, if we're doing that in the confines of a relationship, what are the agreements? And important to honor the agreements, and the more we can make them explicit, the easier it is to know where are the boundaries.
Yeah, I really agree with you that I think one of the most important things I'm in any situation is having a very explicit understanding and agreement of what the situation is, what are your expectations, what are mine. And that is actually one of the things that I myself find really valuable about camming, and particularly LiveJasmin, because it is such a well-known and safe platform. It's been around,
Yeah.
20 plus years. And it does have, strict rules in place to keep everyone safe. But one of the things that I really like about this dynamic between model and member, particularly on LiveJasmin, is the very clear understanding of everyone's role. In so many different relationships in life, you can wonder, well, where is this going? What do they want? What do they think is happening? In this particular situation, it's everyone knows their role. They know what they're there to do and what they're going to get, more or less, and what is something that is not a possibility.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
We're saying it's that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. I actually think in that regard, and it's probably an indirect benefit, but just that sense of clarification, intimate communication, consent, boundary understanding, making it explicit, it actually models things, behaviors that are so necessary and valuable in any intimate relationship. So it's almost like participation with LiveJasmin can present that opportunity to sort of practice that and figure that out, and how to bring it to to real world relationships.
Absolutely. And, I've also interviewed many members and models. But one thing that members have told me repeatedly is that they had these multiple great positive experiences with models on the site. And then the member told me he noticed that when he would go out with his friends, he started feeling more confident to flirt with a woman or ask for her phone number, whereas before he would never, like
Yeah.
every
Yes.
woman would have to approach him. And so it's like, and he even said sometimes he'd kind of role play with the model. The model would give him advice. And so it seems like in some cases, the models are almost acting as like a surrogate relationship or
Yeah.
intimate partnership.
Yes.
And
Yes.
these
Yeah.
men really, many of the members really are learning how to be
Yeah.
because they've never been taught or had a relationship or whatever the case is.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I think that uh, for many people, but particularly people that are more introverted or deal with some shyness or whatnot, they may never have hazarded taking that chance on approaching another person, trying that out. This really, things like LiveJasmin would provide an opportunity in a safer way, in a less threatening way, to be able to develop that skill and to build confidence and really uh, almost as how many things do we benefit from if we could practice, if we could have that kind of exposure and actually, rather than read about it or hear about it, actually do it and then bring it out into the world. I think your odds are better that you feel more comfortable and confident.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like anything in life. If you're a basketball player, if you don't practice in the
Yes.
gym before the
Yes.
game, you're not going to be as confident or
Yeah.
any profession, like
Yeah. Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
What a very old study. One of my favorite studies of basketball was they took, I think it was a college team. They took half the team and they practiced foul shots, and the other half the team stood at the foul line and imagined practicing foul shots. And the team that improved more was the group in imagination that
Yes.
had practice in imagination, which I thought was astounding.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I grew up playing basketball. It's my favorite sport. And I read one time that Kobe Bryant had said he always envisions his shot going in
yeah,
before he shoots
yes,
the free
yes,
throw line.
yeah,
And so I started doing that. And when
yeah,
I would really clearly envision it, it
yeah,
would happen. It's
yes,
fascinating.
yes, yes, and then it becomes more natural. Okay, you know that you talk about being in the zone, and you get used to the movement. I think that's true interpersonally as well. You're you it starts to feel like there's a particular mental or muscle memory that you just immediately go to, where the startup, it doesn't take quite so much, where it's not as difficult, uh, 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 a hill to climb.
Absolutely. I'm curious, is there anything about the world of sexuality or human connection that we haven't talked about, but you really think it's important for the world to know and understand, and you want to share or say?
Well, I would say, as you asked that, what comes to my mind is the challenge in long-term relationships, and that it's almost, I think, commonly believed and understood that a relationship over time can sexually become stale, and that people, whether it's familiarity, this conflict that we have between familiarity and comfort and adventure and novelty, you know and I think that becomes a challenge in long-term relationships. That's not a negative statement about, would you, what's wrong with this relationship that they're finding this difficulty over time, but I think it's really a normal arc or a common arc that occurs in a long-term relationship. And that's where recognizing that as a normal, quote unquote, normal thing, people then don't have to panic and instead can decide, all right, we've got to put some effort into keeping this fresh, okay, and maybe trying something different together, but keeping that intimate dialogue going where you don't take it for granted. And that's where I think something like LiveJasmin, even in the idea of some people look to open up their relationship. Well, this becomes a way that conceivably it could be done without having to kind of enter the lifestyle, so to speak, or go out into the world and really take it on fully. This becomes a way of trying something like that out in a very limited fashion, or other ways that people can do to be able to say, you know what, we can't take each other, or we can't take our sexual relationship for granted, that it's just going to continue to run on automatic pilot. We've got to nurture it and continue to have it evolve, even as we change over time with age.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important point for people to keep in mind and to recognize. So many of these topics are things that I think in life we all kind of try and just not look at it and hope that it just works itself out or something. And
well, who teaches us about it? It's like you have to. I think again with the internet, you can learn more on your own. Okay, but as far as any kind of formal learning or being exposed to it, it's pretty much all right. Figure it out for yourself, and sometimes that could be lead to some rocky lessons, but we have to try.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of trying, my final question would just be, what are some things that either society can do that we should be doing to move in a more sexually healthy direction, or even an individual? What can we do as individuals to move in a more sexually healthy direction with ourselves?
I think it begins with the recognition that how I was raised, okay, has affected me, okay. Whether it's culturally, religious, some aspect of my community. I want to be able to examine what are the beliefs, what are the expectations relating to sexuality for me. Okay, how do I think and feel about that? Ultimately, I am responsible and I own my own sexuality, and I want to kind of develop sort of my own personal sexual guidelines where I can feel I'm accepting of myself, I'm accepting of my desires, I'm not pathologizing myself because I have a particular attraction or interest that might not be in the mainstream or acceptable to these larger groups. And I want to be able to pursue that in my life in a way that's fair to me, but that's also ethical and consensual and not harming anyone else. And I think I probably have to also realize that I must prepare myself to I might get some flack. I might get some disapproval. I might find people who don't agree, people that I care about, or people that are important, and sort of be determined to, in some reasonable and fair way, to still pursue that self-acceptance, that sexual self-acceptance that ultimately will serve me well.
Very well said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're a great interviewer. It's a pleasure
Oh,
talking with you.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.